welcome to Team SNG deck profile. Today we're going to be doing the FA deck profile, and you know what that means? It means we gotta go fast. Gotta go fast. Gotta go fast. While I've got your attention, I'd like to ask you to leave us a like, comment, and subscribe. Also, check out Team's Facebook page down below, and if you're interested in having your profile featured here on this channel, check out the Patreon page down below as well. FAs are an interesting deck. They are based on race cars. Vroom vroom. That's why we gotta go fast, guys. The way that the deck works is it uses level manipulation to get its synchro monsters onto the field. Its synchro monsters gain effects based on the level that they currently are, and every time an FA card activates its effect, whether that's a spell trap or a monster, all the FA monsters gain a level, and based on their level, they gain specific effects. So I think that's enough beating around the bush. Let's just get into it. As always, we're going to start off with the monsters. First, we're going to talk about the FA monsters. And the first one of them is FA Auto Navigator. We run 3 copies of this. This is one of the main play starters for the deck. When it is normal or special summoned, you get to search an FA field spell directly from the deck. On top of that, if you have an FA monster on the field whose level is higher than its original level, you can special summon this card from your hand or from your graveyard by lowering that monster's level and adding how many levels you lowered that one to this one. So this card will be a higher level, and the FA monster will be back down to its original level. Next, we run probably the best main deck FA monster in FA Hang On Mach. Again, we're running 3 copies of him. What FA Hang On Mach does is he becomes a Dark Law when he is level 7 or higher. So if you can get him to level 7 and just leave him sitting on the field, he becomes Dark Law. He, much like all the other FA monsters other than FA Auto Navigator, gains 300 attack for every level he has. So if he's level 7, he's a 2100 beater that you can normal summon from your hand. Finally, the last FA monster we run in the main deck is FA Whip Crosser. Whip Crosser is an interesting FA monster because when it's level 7 or higher, it basically makes it so your opponent can't activate monsters in the hand. Meaning any special summon from the hand effects, any dangers, any hand traps are all turned off. So if you've got a lot of searching to do, or as you'll see in the test hands, if you go into your Halqifibrax plays, then you can use FA Whip Crosser to stop those pesky Ash Blossoms and those other pesky hand traps that your opponent may be holding on to. That does it for the FA monsters. Next, we're going to talk about some of the engines we run, the first of which is Speedroids. We run Speedroid Terratop and 3 copies of Speedroid Takatomborg. Speedroid Terratop, if you control no card, special summon itself from the hand. When it is special or normal summoned, you get to special summon from the deck a Speedroid monster, so you're going to special summon your Speedroid Takatomborg. Now, the reason we run 3 Takatomborgs is Takatomborg in your hand can be used as a automatic special summon because what it's going to do is you can special summon it so long as you control a wind monster. Now, it does have a secondary effect which will let you search out a Speedroid Tuner. You'll notice we're not running any of those, so that effect doesn't really come into play. But that effect does come with the restriction that you can only special summon wind monsters for the rest of the turn. Now, this isn't tied to his special summon from the hand effect, so you're in a shape where you can actually use his special summon from the hand to give yourself an extra body without locking yourselves into wind monsters, which is kind of important because a lot of the stuff in the extra deck we need isn't wind-based. Because this deck can be so normal summon reliant, the next engine we run gives ourselves an additional normal summon, and that is the Symphonic engine. 3 Symphonic Warrior Guitars and 2 Symphonic Warrior Mics. Symphonic Warrior Guitar, when activated in the Pendulum Scale, lets you discard a card to special summon a Symphonic monster from your deck. So you're going to then special summon your Symphonic Warrior Mics. While Mics is on the field, you get to normal summon an additional time. So what you can do is you can pitch a card for Symphonic Warrior Mics, and then you get an additional normal summon. So you can have 2 normal summons, which can definitely come into play, letting yourself get one of, say, FA Hang On Mach on the field, as well as maybe normal summoning something else from your hand to help you continue your plays. The next engine contains the best normal summon of the deck, so if you have your Symphonic Warrior Mics on the field, you can use this engine to get yourself a little bit further. and that is 3 copies of Despot 003 and 2 copies of Despot 001. If you haven't checked out the Karakuri deck profile, you can see how powerful this engine really can be in that deck. Despot 003 is an automatic Auroradon with 3 tokens and 2 tuners on the field at once, which can be really powerful because that means you can go into a lot of synchro plays. So that's why we run this engine as well. That does it for our monsters. Now for our spells. The first spells we're going to talk about are the field spells that are run. The first of which is UA Hyper Stadium. So this always counts as an FA spell, which is why I joke that it is FA Hyper Stadium. It acts as a rota for the deck. It lets you search out any FA monster from your deck directly to your hand. Now, it also can give you an additional normal summon. If you have a field spell in your hand, you can reveal the field spell, pay 1,000 life points, and then normal summon an FA monster from your hand as well. So that gives you an additional normal summon as well, which can be really useful because, as I stated, the deck is kind of normal summon reliant. The other field spell we run is 2 copies of FA City Grand Prix. Now, the reason we only run 2 of this is we are effectively running, with FA Auto Navigator, 3 additional copies, and we are running 3 additional copies of FA Auto Navigator with our UA Hyper Stadium. So we're running so many ways to see our City Grand Prix that realistically we should always be able to see it. On top of that, because this deck does rely on its field spells, we run our 1 copy of Terraforming to let ourselves see our UA Hyper Stadium or our FA City Grand Prix depending on what we need at any given time. Now on to some of the other FA spells that we run. We run 2 copies of FA Test Run. This card's really useful. It lets you target an FA monster you control, change its battle position, and pop a card on your opponent's side of the field. So this can be really, really useful for us because of the very simple fact it does allow us to interrupt our opponent's turn. It also, because it's an FA card, it will trigger all our FA monsters to increase their level. And also, in the graveyard, you can target a face-up card that you control, pop it, and special summon an FA monster from deck. Now, if you pop your FA City Grand Prix with this effect, you get to also search out a FA card from your deck, meaning that you can utilize this to pop your Grand Prix to search and also to special summon from the deck. So this can be really useful to help yourself get advantage after you've used its effect to pop something on your opponent's side of the field as well. Next, we have 2 copies of probably one of my favorite FA cards for its artwork and for its effect in FA Downforce. FA Downforce allows us to increase the level of any of our FA monsters by 2. This will actually technically increase its level by 3 because of the fact that the FA monster will also increase its level because an FA spell was used. So that's really useful because it gives our FAs a giant power boost, and if we end up with Hang On Mock sitting on the field, we can activate this at the start of our opponent's turn to give our Hang On Mock a Dark Law effect on our opponent's turn. In the graveyard, you can banish this card to do it again. So this can be really useful. The one thing I will say about their graveyard, all the FA spell graveyard effects, is they can only be utilized after the turn that they were sent to the grave. So you can't use it and then use it again in the same turn. But that's not really the end of the world. The final FA spell that we run is FA Pit Stop. Now this lets us sort our hand out a little bit. What it does is it decreases the level of one of our FA monsters by 2 to let us draw a card for each FA Pit Stop in the grave plus 1. So you can decrease it with no FA Pit Stops in the grave, and that will let you draw 1 card. If you have 1 FA Pit Stop in the grave already, it'll let you draw 2. The graveyard effect of the FA Pit Stop can be very useful as well, though, because you can banish this to special summon an FA monster from your grave. So this lets you recur stuff from the grave later in the game. Next, onto one of the other new cards from Phantom Rage, UA Locker Room. UA Locker Room is a really interesting card because it lets us fix our hand and recur stuff from the grave at the same time. So when we activate it, we get to add back a FA monster from the graveyard, or we can bounce a card, FA monster, from our field back to our hand. Then we get to reveal FA monsters or UA monsters in our hand to shuffle them back into our deck and draw cards equal to the number of cards shuffled back into our deck. The reason this is really useful is it lets us recur stuff from our graveyard, and it lets us fix our hand, which can be critical in a deck that is so reliant on being able to get into Halqifibrax shenanigans from time to time. The other thing I really do like about this card is if you see right here, FA midfielder is having his, or UA midfielder, sorry, is having his stretch. And right next to him, that looks to me like FA Auto Navigator, which I think is quite a cute little wink to the fact that we have our combined archetypes here with UA and FA. And for the final spell that we run, because the deck is reliant on seeing certain cards, just a little bit of draw power, and also to shrink the deck down to 39 cards. We have our Upstart Goblin. That does it for our spells. Onto our traps. We only run one, and we run 2 copies of it. That trap is FA Dead Heat. This is such a useful card. When your opponent declares a direct attack, you get to special summon an FA monster directly from the deck. If your opponent attacks an FA monster, then both players will roll a 6-sided dice, and if you have the higher roll, you get to increase your FA monster's level by 4, which in fact increases its attack by 1200. However, if your result is lower than your opponent's roll, then you destroy that monster automatically. So you can only use each effect once per turn, but at the end of the day, you will likely blow something up off of your opponent's side of the field if you win that dice roll. And now, that is risky. However, the risk is definitely worth it. Now onto the extra deck. So, obviously, we run some FA stuff in the extra deck. The first is 2 copies of FA Shining Star GT. This card gains 300 attack for the level of the FA monsters it points to. However, it can't do battle damage, and you take no battle damage from battles involving it. So if you leave it sitting out here at 0 attack, it's not the end of the world. Every time an FA card activates its effect, you get to put an athlete counter on your Shining Star GT. And at any time, if your opponent activates a monster effect, you get to negate the activation of that effect by removing an athlete counter from this card. So this is your monster negate that the deck has access to. To go with any good monster negate, you want some spell trap negate. And this deck does that via FA Dawn Dragster. FA Dawn Dragster can lower its level by 2 to negate a spell or trap your opponent activates. So that can be really useful for helping you keep your opponent from building a too big of a board for you to overcome. It starts off as a level 7, but it will typically increase its level due to the fact you will be using FA effects throughout your turn and potentially throughout your opponent's as well. The final FA monster that we run is FA Motorhome. This is the big boss monster for this deck. I actually think it's a fantastic monster that this deck can utilize. It starts out as a level 9 monster, but let's face facts, if you have an FA's field spell on the field, such as your City Grand Prix, you're going to likely have this card sitting at level 11. When it's level 11, it cannot be destroyed by card effect or battle. When it is level 13, once per turn, you can special summon with no cost an FA monster from your graveyard back to the field. At that point, it is going to be sitting at a whopping 3,900 attack. It can't be destroyed by card effect or battle, and it's bringing you recursion every single turn. So FA Motorhome Transport is probably the best card to try and get into, but typically, you're not going to get into it turn 1, it's going to be a turn 2 or turn 3 play. That does it for our FA monsters. Now, onto our High Speedroids. We run High Speedroid Puzzle. Typically, you're not going to go into this, but this is more it's here in case you end up with going into your Halqifibrax play, 2 Despots, and you have no way of getting rid of that second Despot and second token. You can go into your High Speedroid Puzzle. High Speedroid Puzzle can be really useful because when it battles your opponent, you can increase its you can double its attack points, making it a 2600 beater if nothing else. It does have an effect in Grave, but that doesn't really come up very often, and that is that you can add a Speedroid back from the grave to your hand if it is sent there after being synchro summoned. So this can definitely let you recur your Takatomborg if you need to for later plays, but if you haven't seen Takatomborg, this really doesn't come into play at all. The second is your big boss monster for if you're going second, and that is High Speedroid Kite Drake. What this lets you do is you can either destroy all the other cards on the field, or you can negate the effects of all face-up cards your opponent currently controls. So it acts as a Dark Ruler no more that you can go into later in your turn to give yourself the ability to run over your opponent. You're typically not going into this turn 1, obviously, but you typically, if you do have to go second, which you will from time to time, you are probably going to be able to go into this. And going into this will help you break your opponent's board. Next, we're going to talk about some of the other synchros that we run. The first is Desert Locusts. This is really only here for the Halqifibrax tribute play, and you're only going to use it if your opponent has stopped you mid-combo. So it's a safety net that will let you force your opponent to discard a card when it is summoned using Halqifibrax, and it will also let you synchro summon on your opponent's turn, so you don't necessarily lose all of the speed and momentum that you've built up if your opponent does stop you at Halqifibrax. Next, we run 2 copies of Clearwing Fast Dragon. Clearwing Fast Dragon acts as a monster negate of anything that your opponent has special summoned from the extra deck. Another level 7 we run is our Cyberse Quantum Dragon. Now this can be such a good card for us because we will typically be left on the board with an Auroradon. So if we can go into Cyberse Quantum Dragon, our opponent can only target this for card effects and for battle, meaning that our opponent will have to attack this most likely. Also, if our opponent does attack this, we get to bounce whatever attacked it back to the hand, or typically back to the deck if in the case of an extra deck monster. Finally, the last synchro we run is our Borreload Savage Dragon. Now this is typically the best level 8 that you're going to go into. You'll probably go into this instead of Kite Drake because normally you're going to want to go first, and so this gives you negates on your opponent's turn, which is really useful. That does it for all the synchro monsters we run. Finally, on to our Halqifibrax Shenanigans plays, which requires 1 Crystron Halqifibrax and 1 Mecha Phantom Beast Auroradon. The Auroradon produces you the 3 tokens that you will typically sync off into your synchro plays, and the Halqifibrax brings out your monster, your tuner, that you will then use to climb into your Mecha Phantom Beast Auroradon. So this is your typical Halqifibrax Shenanigans. That does it for the extra deck. So my final thoughts on this deck, I really do like the aesthetic that it has of the race cars. I love the leveling up mechanic because it really does fit with that aesthetic of them building up speed. And I do like how FA Pit Stop, one of their spell cards, that while it does give you advantage, takes some of that speed away, like a car stopping for a pit stop in a regular Formula 1 race. The way that this deck really relies on its field spells can definitely be a bit of a hindrance. However, with the new UA Stadium, we do actually have ourselves a rota for the deck, which lets us search out our FA Auto Navigator, who will then let us search out the best field spell in the deck in FA City Grand Prix, allowing you to run only 2 copies of your FA City Grand Prix. The boss monsters can be a bit intimidating, being able to stop your opponent's spells, your opponent's monsters, and being able to protect themselves from battle and card effect while recurring yourself a lot of advantage from the graveyard later on in the game. Now, the problem that I do have with this deck, and it's the only problem I really have, is that it is so normal summon reliant. But because of the fact that we do run our Symphonic engine, that is sort of dealt with, because we get the additional normal summon that Symphonic Warrior Mics allows for us. On top of that, we can use our Halqifibrax Shenanigans to give ourselves a much better board and a lot more consistency. And obviously, that means that we need our Halqifibrax and our Mecha Phantom Beast Auroradon to do that. At the end of the day, this deck isn't going to go win some massive tournament, but it'll definitely steal some wins at a locals, and it'll be a lot of fun to play at a locals because of the very simple fact it is just something different. And that's what I love about this deck. It is something different. It uses a mechanic that no other deck utilizes of the level increases and the level manipulation to get yourselves into your boss monsters and to put your opponent on their back foot. That being said, I'd like to thank you guys for watching. Do leave us a like, comment, and subscribe. And check out the team's Patreon if you want your deck profile featured here on this channel. All I can say at this point is check out the test hands video. Link will be down in the description below. And I will see you guys at the next video.